This was part of a three-park system. This is the only one left. So this area was all underwater. As the city grew and progress came and industry developed, the need for more land in a more favorable location became paramount, especially with the development of the railroads. So the waterfront was changed to allow railroad tracks to be built. The railroad companies, very, very powerful. They wanted to have downtown Toronto. They wanted to run the railway lines right into the middle of the city in downtown. The city, in its wisdom, said, no thank you. We want to keep the roads the way they are. So the railroad said, okay, we'll just make our own. And they started dumping tons and tons and tons of dirt into the lake and moved the lake back to put the railroads. So everything south of Front Street, which was the street that ran along the lake, everything from there, the Sky Dome, all of CN Town, all of that stuff, that's all on landfill that was dumped in to build the railroads. Richard St. Barb Baker, and he developed this idea that restoring the world would restore humanity and heal the people. He moved to Africa, to Kenya, and worked with the natives there. Joshua Njojo, who was the chief of the Kiyuk tribe. And they were the co-founders of a movement called, if I pronounce it correctly, Watuwa Mite, the Men of the Trees. Since their founding in 1924, they have planted 25 billion trees all around the world. Came back to Canada, to Toronto, right at the right moment when the city and others were trying to decide how we were going to recreate and restore the waterfront. So, in 1934, money was granted to build this park. Now, it just so happened that the king was coming to make a visit, King George V, and of course, King George VI after him. So, the coronation of King George VI coincided with the completion of the park. Then, in 1939, Queen Elizabeth, the mother of our present queen, and her husband, George VI, were coming for a royal visit. And so the idea was to commemorate that further with more trees. And the fact that it's called Coronation Park, why? Well, we don't know. That's it, to its original purpose, which was a place of contemplation and refuge for those wounded in spirit. You were able to come down here and walk among the trees that were lifting their branches up to God, and you would find contentment and a little bit of ease for your stress and strain. That was the whole concept. So here we are at Coronation Park, established by man, for men, totally man-made, a great accomplishment by a small group of dedicated people over many years. No longer good enough for the army. It's made of wood. A good bomb will burn all the wood to the ground. So the idea was to build a new fort, a bigger fort, a better fort made of stone. In 1841, it was established here. So you are now standing on part of the original parade ground of the new fort of 1841. There were soldiers' barracks sliding this direction, facing this way. There was a junior ranks mess on the other side of the big A. And there's this, the officers' mess. So Stanley Barracks, the last remaining building of the new fort, built in 1841. And right now it's being used by the hotel as construction office space. Right beside it is now what's called Hotel X. Part of the deal in building the hotel here and leasing the land, they had to do some restoration work. So when it's finished, this walkway here that's under steel will have a glass floor, and you can walk across it and see the archaeological remains of the fort that existed here in the 1840s. Fort Rouillé, built under the reign of King Louis XV. It was built because it's by the lake. That's very important. Ontario Place, that didn't exist. It was all open water. Today, this is all that remains of the fort. Memorial cairn and this cement small walkway which represents the outer wall of the fort. So this cement path here that zigzags around, this was actually the wooden palisade enclosing the fort. Because it was here and the natives came here to trade, they established a village for themselves just basically where that white truck is. And then traders and others who wanted to sell stuff to the natives decided this is a good spot to trade, so they built little houses attached to the outside of the fort. So in all there was about 5 to 8 buildings attached or part of this fort. If you know your history, General Wolfe and the British, mostly Irish and Scottish soldiers, whooped the French, and they retreated from Quebec to establish their headquarters in Montreal. The Chevalier de Lévis took over from Montcalm after his death, and he decided that the only way to push the English out, the British out, was to consolidate all the forces he could to build a bigger army. So he ordered all the troops, the 50 or 60 that were here, to scoot down the 401 and get to Montreal as fast as they could. So, not wanting the British to have possession of this fort as they were moving up through Detroit and coming back this way to squish the French, they set fire and burnt this fort to the ground. They built, restored what they could, took out whatever artifacts were found, not many, and built this memorial to the French presence in Toronto.